Cory and July, and we have a lot to learn from the past. We have a lot to learn from our ancestors, from the people who built the world, and that includes most of all of us, actually, a lot of people who are not in the history books. However, we do have a lot of people who spoke out, who became leaders and created movements, created philosophy, and created different ways of thinking that is worth noting, especially if they have messages that started to circulate online. And so we're going to take a look at a lot of the messages and see how maybe they connect and see maybe what we can learn from this for not only ourselves, our health, and our mentality, but for changing the world. And that's really important that we learn from the past in order to do so, so that we can move forward without making mistakes. And what we have here is, I'm going to try to connect all the dots for you. We have many different people, everybody from Greek physicians to Greek philosophers, Latin. You have people from the Renaissance period, you have people from the Enlightenment eras, whatever you want to call it. You have even some people in religion. We're going to go over a lot of different types of examples, and there's always something to learn from everybody. Regardless of perhaps what they've done, sometimes it's good to look at the messages, what they had to say, because we can still learn from whatever, regardless. And so let's go through this and see what we can make of this. So the first one is, quote, "The state of nature has a law of nature to govern it, which obliges every one, and reason, which is that law, teaches all mankind who will but consult it, that being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions," by John Locke. Okay, now he mentions reason as a big component there, because reasoning and understanding is one of the key ways to actually attaining knowledge and understanding it. So we need to reason with people if we want to show them perhaps an idea that hasn't been shown before. Kind of like what I'm doing here is reasoning about what this quote actually means, right? There's a reason why he said it. There's a reason why these people existed. There's a reason why these people had positions of power, for example, right? Now, this guy in particular doesn't have too much positions in power, but he was during the same time period or so as George Washington and I believe the other so-called founding fathers of 1776. So we're specifically talking here, this quote, about the state of nature and that it's ran by natural laws. You know, we have a lot to learn here, so that's why there's so many quotes here, and that's why I didn't necessarily organize them in one particular fashion. So just know that I'm still going to try to connect all the dots, and I'm sure you can make a lot of connections between these many multiple different quotes, but it would take me a lot of time to organize these and put them together. So we're kind of just going to go right through them and see what we can learn from each one in their individual speculation. Okay, so this one says, quote, "Healing doesn't mean that damage never existed. It means that damage no longer controls your life." So that means, yeah, there will always be wrong, there will always be evil in the world, but that doesn't mean that you can't heal, right? In fact, sometimes that helps us seek the balance, sometimes that helps us learn, right? So, healing is actually having damage control. Control over yourself instead of having the damage control you in your life, essentially debunking slavery. And this quote was said by Akshay Dubey. Here's some other text here that we have, because it's not just all quotes. It is mostly quotes to understand more of the past. But look at this article here. It says, "The brain patterns of human consciousness. Scientists discover signatures showing the mind is, quote, aware in a major breakthrough." And then it says in the description, "Humans have learned to travel through space, eradicate diseases, and understand nature at the breathtaking tiny level of fundamental particles." And so a lot of what I'm talking about is understanding nature, right? Not just what's around us, not just what we do, but how things manifest. And that way we can understand what's happening. And if we see that natural medicine is an answer, and we see that natural law is an answer to leading us in the right direction, a directional guide, a motivation, a path, a direction to go toward, then why aren't we following that direction? And if we're going the opposite direction, is it worth noting? And how do we reverse that condition? So having human consciousness, we have this great ability called willpower, and the ability to be aware of our actions. And then through being aware, we can then decide, what do we choose to do with the knowledge that we have? What do we choose to do with the awareness, right? If I see something in plain sight, am I going to identify it? Am I going to recognize it? Am I going to understand it? And do I really need to understand it? Well, do we need to understand the condition we're in, if it's getting worse, if it's really bad, or if people don't see what's going on? That's the point here. Here we have another quote by John Locke, and it says, quote, "The natural liberty of man is to be free from any superior power on earth, and not to be under the authority of man, but only to have the law of nature for his rule." Now, of course, this is one of his beliefs, right? But we see this in practice as we do study natural law. We see how government is inherently immoral because they're ruling over others, because they are committing forms of theft, which most of all violations upon property is. And so therefore you have to question the existence and why is it necessary, which is why we're going to go even deeper into this. And, it's worth stating that there's a great simplicity in nature, regardless of where you stand on this matter and this topic, because there's always something to learn, and we see how beautiful and how simple the world is when we get rid of all this conjecture and all this boundaries in our head that we've created. So you see here a quote by Aristotle, quote, "Nature does nothing uselessly," because everything in nature has a reason. So yes, we are to reason with others, but also understand that everything does have a reason. Nothing is just like coming out of nowhere. Everything is the way it is because there's a harmony, there's a balance, there's an integration. Hence integrative medicine. Of course, we're going to tie in some medicine components in here too, but that's because health is everything, right? And we're going to get into what that means as well, because it's important that you're happy, right? So then wouldn't that be mental health? So this is important to know, that you are useful because you are part of the process. The next quote here we have, "If one way be better than another, that you may be sure is nature's way." That is also by Aristotle. Okay, so we have all these paths. We have man's law, we have natural law, right? And natural law has been with us all this time. It is universal, it is eternal, something we can all abide to because it's always here all the time. And we're not taught this in school. It's often referred to as occult knowledge because they don't want you knowing it. But why is that? Because it would take down the power differential. It would take down the power structure. So, if one way being better than another, then yeah, that is nature's way because nature has everything intended. Nature's the truth, may you call it, right? So let's move on and see more about this. You may disagree with me, and that is perfectly fine. So let's keep learning. The next quote is, quote, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." So yes, trying to find yourself. And how do you do that? And you notice there's a picture of nature in the background. Ralph Waldo Emerson had a great theme of nature within his writings. In fact, I believe he even had a writing called Nature, in talking about the relationship between us and the world around us and with others. So to be yourself can be difficult, especially when other things are trying to imitate your behavior, such as technology, right? And so when you have all these other people telling you what to think and all these different belief systems, I'm not trying to push anything onto you, but I'm here to just try to help you think about what is going on. How do you be yourself? How do we think clearly when there's all this going around? Is nature the answer there? And you'll notice, yeah, like nature is a common theme, but why is that? It's because, well, instead of saying God, or instead of saying the universe or the world, notice how everybody can agree upon this one simple premises that, yes, we have this world around us, and it can be universally abiding with this simple word that has multiple meanings, all of which help us understand more about ourselves. So, for example, you see this in the quote here. It says, "Lose yourself in nature and find peace," by Ralph Waldo Emerson. So instead of losing yourself in technology or something that may not serve you, right? Something that might not be actually productive or healing you actively, lose yourself in something that is not going to harm you, in fact, only heal you. And maybe then, yes, you can find peace, but can we really? Let's keep looking, moving on. We have the quote here by Ralph Waldo Emerson, nature hates calculators. And the reason probably why that is you see a movement called scientism growing. I won't even call it a movement, it's an ideology, right? Everything is a belief system. So we have calculators. Well, if you're extreme left brain, if you're very scientism, then yeah, you're probably going to want to calculate everything. You probably don't want to go by the way of God because you believe everything must be proven by science. And I'm not saying that science shouldn't be used here, but always calculating everything when we have this truth around us, when we have the beauty of simplicity around us, how do we go about this? Let's keep looking. You see, this is one of my favorite quotes. It says, controversy is only dreaded by the advocates of error. Okay, because those who make mistakes on their daily lives will dread, actually, controversy of people saying, well, what is going on here? Why is it that this is going on, right? Questioning the status quo, questioning why are things not going right? Because that's how we fix it, right, is by identifying the problem, and then from there we could diagnose the disease, therefore, before treating it. And this is a quote by Benjamin Rush, a medical doctor himself. Another quote from Benjamin Rush, quote, we have not only multiplied diseases, but we have made them more fatal. How much more is this to speak of the modern world? I don't know what is. I mean, you see diseases like cancer, right? You see diseases that some speculate were never around before, or manifestations from older diseases due to what we've been doing in our bad practices. You see a lot of old home remedies going down the drain, or the media's attacking them saying it's quack medicine. So why is that? Because back in the day, you see George Washington would order many onions to heal his troops, for example. Now maybe there was some bad science, right, like using heavy metals to actually treat diseases, when in reality it did not help. But we do know there's also really beneficial metals, and we learn through time, we learn from nature. The problem is when we try to be nature, perhaps, because now we're then multiplying diseases, we're making new ones due to the more responsibilities we put on ourselves. So, let me know, why do you think that is, if this is an important quote to you? See, from Benjamin Rush, he even said this in an essay in 1786. He said, quote, freedom can exist only in the society of knowledge. Without learning, men are incapable of knowing their rights. And where learning is confined to a few people, liberty can be neither equal nor universal. So this tells us a lot about our world, because if we're not learning from this innate, inherent, knowledge that is in this world, so-called natural law, for example, right? And we're not learning, which is through a way of knowledge, through a way of awareness, being conscious, okay, then how will we know what we are to do in this life? How do we know our purpose? How do we know ourselves? This can be hard, and then you want to make laws without knowing these simple premises first, like all these simple ideas first, when it's been talked about for over 300, 400 years. You got to question, why is it that history repeats itself? Is it because people are not learning from the past? And then how do we keep such learning about? How do we keep this afloat? Right? Because what they're saying now, if you look at these quotes and a lot of the other quotes, I mean, you question, like, why is it that these people forewarned us before everything happened? So liberty can be neither equal nor universal when learning is confined to a few people. You have to question, is there knowledge that is being kept away from us? Is there a reason why the word occult stands in existence as for hidden knowledge? Quote, the American War is over, but this is far from being the case with the American Revolution, by Benjamin Rush. And this is also a very good quote, because it tells us that, well, this is not the first revolution. In fact, it is just a stepping stone in history toward what really is, living in abundance to what we are to do, right? It's been this long journey of finding Well, what do we do? What is the right government? Everyone wants to say, this is the right way to live. This is the right way to live. Why is it that people have to decide what is the best way to live? What if we learn about what is actually intended? What is actually here? Let's keep investigating. It says, quote, "It would seem from this fact that man is naturally a wild animal, and that when taken from the woods, he is never happy in his natural state till he returns to them again." This is by Benjamin Rush, again, a medical doctor from the 1700s, basically saying that we are part of nature. Thank you for watching this video. Feel free to subscribe, like, and do whatever you wish. It's up to you. You are free in this life, and if you want to know how to change the world truly, please, I encourage you to check out my website, Nita.one. It's here for all of us, actually. It's not my website. It is my website, but it isn't. It's here for us all. We're all messengers. We're all fellow human beings. Let's change the world truly, and we can do it with Nita.one. Nature's the answer.